Okay. Are you seeing my cursor move around?
You're not screen sharing yet.
Okay. Said I was. No, you're not. Am I now? No. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Also, the production of ACTH we said. That's the longest one, letter-wise. Adenocorticotropic hormone. And that's a tongue twister if you try to say it fast a couple times. It signals the adrenal cortex to produce steroids such as cortisone, aldosterone. Uh, Aldosterone helps the kidney retain water also, so it has a secondary effect. FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, produced by the anterior pituitary, that stimulates the ovary, which is the target organ, to mature a follicle. Okay. If I were to say, what is the target organ of FSH? And I wanted to see if I could trick you. I don't do that, but I might say ovary, and that would be the correct answer. I might say follicle, and that's not the correct answer because that's not a target organ. That isn't even an organ. Okay, uh, so the precise answer for FSH is that the target organ is the ovary. Luteinizing hormone does the same thing as FSH in preparation for the development and maturation of an ovum. Melanocyte stimulating hormone, when it's released, the skin pigment cells, if you have any, cause greater pigmentation. Now, a person that is an albino, and you rarely, I know we rarely see true albinos, but I've seen a couple, and they have pigment cells, but they do not produce pigment. Doesn't work. Okay, now the thyroid gland. You know where the thyroid gland is, I hope. Okay, if you just grab your throat, you got your hand on it. It's a two-part organ right here with an isthmus going across. Embedded in the thyroid, since we're looking at it, are two very small glands that don't show in this diagram because they are just quite small. They're showing one. There's the second, but you're going to have to use more imagination than your book here. The thyroid gland produces two hormones. One is calcitonin, and the other is thyroxine. Thyroxine. Both of these are involved in development. The thyroxine, move back up, thyroid hormone or thyroxine. This is responsible for your overall development. And much the same way as human growth hormone stimulates or has an effect upon the entire body, thyroid hormone does as well. Both of these are mostly important in development or developmental stages. The human growth hormone that I mentioned the last time, that was produced by the anterior pituitary, the HGH. Okay, a lack of that or an under secretion of that while you're developing will cause what's called a pituitary dwarf. Okay, now I mentioned about being careful using terms like dwarf and midget or anything like that. Between us, I'm not using it in any disparaging way. I'm just using it in a traditional way, and somebody ought to change the tradition somehow. Okay, but human growth hormone, when it's lacking, causes a pituitary dwarf, and that's a person who's short, small, in other words, usually slight, and uh, otherwise normally proportioned. It's like a smaller person. Everything, height, width, everything's in proportion. Unfortunately for the pituitary person, uh, their lifespan usually reaches about 40, and that's it. And senility often develops before that. For the thyroid deficient person, the development of the body is not proportionate. Okay, and the arms are short, stocky. The body is short and stocky. Uh, if you remember any of you, Billy Barty or there's another couple of other actors on out who are thyroid dwarfs, and they're pretty darn good too. But they're short, very short, and they have the stocky arms and the stocky legs. Very easy to distinguish the two. Well, the thyroid also produces calcitonin. And calcitonin regulates calcium metabolism in young adults or young individuals. By that I mean the development of the bones. Now jump quickly to the parathyroid glands, the two that are embedded, two on each side on the thyroid, and they produce parathyroid hormone, which regulates calcium metabolism in young individuals too. Okay, calcium and phosphorus metabolism, actually both of them. Uh, one helps for its deposition, and one stops from too much being deposited. So these two are sort of like muscles working in antagonistic fashion, the calcitonin and the uh, parathyroid hormone. Have you ever seen anybody with a goiter? I'm talking about a goiter around their neck. It almost looks like one of those airplane pillows that you or horseshoes that you put around your neck to ease the flight and make it more comfortable. Anybody seen a person with a goiter? They're not very common anymore. When I was a kid, people with goiters were uh, not all that populous either, but you'd see them. You walk downtown Los Angeles, you'd see one every day. Person with a goiter, the big swelling around their neck, and the only medical cure at that time for this was to cut away some of the goiter, just cut it off, sort of like liposuction on the neck, and that might make somebody feel better because they look more presentable, I guess they thought, or at least they weren't so outstanding. But unfortunately, when people, surgeons long ago, took parts of the goiter away, they did not realize as they were removing the portion of the thyroid gland, which the goiter was, they also took out the parathyroids. And if they took them out unknowingly uh, or accidentally, it was certain death for the individual because their bone development would cease to function properly. They would end up in a situation where just rolling over in bed would start cracking ribs, and pretty soon they just their bones would not produce blood to replenish for their body, and they died. So a lot of times you saw people running around with goiters just because they didn't want to have the operation. And then somebody figured out what it was. This was all done by demographics. Get a map out, put pins in it where the number of people with goiters per thousand or 100,000 was greater than this or that, and populate the map with pins and find out where all the goiters were occurring and where they were not occurring in the world. And they were not occurring in places like Japan and places that had a large diet of seafood. And somebody figured then out that, maybe it's iodine. They're getting more iodine in places where they don't have goiters. And so they start giving people iodine. The easiest way to do it in those days was use iodized salt. Okay. And people would use salt with the iodine in it, and essentially no more goiters to speak of. When I'm at the store and I see somebody buying non-iodized salt, I just wonder, uh, well, you must be getting your uh, iodine from some other source. Uh, but uh, I always buy iodized salt. Okay. Uh, there was one other thing that was found by demographics too. I mean, just looking at charts, that you didn't really have to do a lot of research on. You just needed a wall, a map of the world, and pins. And that was where people were found to have manic depression, also known as bipolar disease, bipolar disorder. Oh, they got lots of names for it. Manic depression was the old name, and I'm going to assume that most of you are at least vaguely familiar with bipolar disease, where you have a manic period where you're up, you're about, and you have a depressed period where you're just lazy, you're tired, you're frustrated, and you go back and forth between the two. I think almost everybody is believed to have a cycle. And in this cycle, you go up and you go down. You go up and down across the midline. When you're high, you're high. When you're low, you're low. And some people, though, have a magnitude uh, of change, such that when they're high, they're climbing the walls. They're literally climbing the walls. I have seen these people myself in the hospital, and I think I've seen some of them in everyday life. And then when you're low, you're just so low you can't even get out of bed. Okay. Now, most of you don't have uh, extremes like that. I'm hopeful. If you do, I hope you have them under control. But uh, most people have highs and lows, and this cycle, like a wave, comes and goes maybe once only or twice a year. People who tell me, "Oh, I'm feeling bad this week," and then good next week, bad this week. That's too frequent. That's not it. That's not it. You know, or I'm good in the morning, but I'm bad in the afternoon. Good in the morning, bad in the afternoon. That's not it. This cycle is a sort of rhythmic cycle. Well, they tried to figure out what was wrong with people. They still don't know. Most of the reading I've done recently actually sees it as a blood disorder. Okay, and they did some research looking into it, and they put the pins in the map. Where does it happen? Where does it not happen? And they were just looking at the United States at that time. And when they did this, they found that there were two places in the United States that anybody who was born there and stayed there never experienced manic depression. Okay? People who came there lost their manic depression. People who left there sometimes became manic. Okay, so these were two safe havens if you wanted to happen to be in these places. Not many people really. Lubbock, Texas. No, not me. And the other was Scranton, Pennsylvania. Not me there either. You know, but they had very high levels of lithium in their water supply, and by adding that simple element, number two, lithium, into their medication, it essentially can just stop this cold. I know there are cases when it won't, but it was rather cheap fix. Okay, let's go on to the pancreas. The pancreas is the most important of the remaining as far as illustrating hormonal action. The pancreas secretes two uh, hormones. It secretes insulin and it secretes glucagon. Okay, if you have diabetes, you know more about this than I do. You probably know more about it than the other people who are sitting here listening to what I'm going to say. Okay, but there are different types of diabetes. Okay, most people don't know what insulin actually does unless they have diabetes. They learn, or they have a class like this. Insulin stimulates the absorption of sugar into the tissues from the blood. Okay, you have sugar in the blood. A lot of people even think sugar's a bad word, but sugar, especially in the form of glucose, is the only type of energy source that your brain will use. Okay, so we need that for your brain. We need it for the growth and development and just metabolism of all of our tissues. So insulin helps the absorption of sugar from the blood into the tissue. Working against it is glucagon, okay? And it stimulates the conversion of glycogen to sugar in the liver and the release of sugar into the blood. Okay, this last part's the important part, the release of sugar into the blood. Okay, insulin is sugar from the blood into the tissues. We don't want all the sugar to go into the tissues. What would happen if that were the case? Well, then the brain would not have any sugar in the blood for itself. So we have to stop insulin from going crazy here. Okay. And then on glucagon's case, we want it has the release of sugar into the blood. But if glucagon is in control, then the release of sugar into the blood would be an outpouring of sugar from the tissues, and then the tissues would not function properly. Okay. We call the lack of insulin, simply enough, we call it diabetes. And that is too simple. There are different types of diabetes, but the lack of insulin leads to diabetes. Why is that? If we have the lack of insulin, we're going to have a lack of what it does. And that means that there will be less movement of sugar into the tissues. And the sugar stays in the blood. That gives you what we call high blood sugar or hyperglycemia. Okay. And high blood sugar is definitely a sign of insulin deficiency. The brain doesn't have any problem with that because there's plenty of sugar in the blood for it to get a hold of. Okay, but the rest of the body deteriorates. My cousin in England, I never met him. His name is Barry. Uh, we used to be pen pals, even though we'd never met each other as kids. And he would write to me. And one day I asked my mother, "Why is Barry's writing getting so bad? Why is it getting so bad?" And she said, "He has diabetes. He has diabetes, and he does whatever he can not to take his medicine. because he doesn't like to get the shots. And I said, oh, okay. And I continued to write to him, and it was getting worse. And I said, why did it get so worse? And my mother said to me, they took, they had to amputate his right arm. That's the one he writes with. He never talked to me about this. This is crazy. Uh, so he's writing with his left hand. And then his writing got beautiful. I had asked my mother one last time, why is the writing now so good? And she said, Grandma's writing it because he can't use the other arm either. Oh, well, it's just progressive with if you don't uh, have the insulin or the supplement uh, from right these days from pig pancreas. There is a human form of insulin, very expensive. Okay. A lack of glucagon. What will a lack of glucagon have? If you don't have the glucagon, you won't have the release of sugar into the blood. Okay. Instead, the sugar will go in from the blood into the tissues the other way. And the blood will be low in sugar if you don't have enough glucagon. And if the blood is low in sugar, we call that hypoglycemia or low blood sugar. People with low blood sugar can get very agitated, uh, very frightened, or just lethargic or pass out. We always have people passing out in anatomy class, but it's usually because they didn't eat breakfast, and that was as simple as that. Okay. Okay. These two work against each other, and because they work against each other, it's in a positive fashion that they manage to keep the blood sugar at the right level. We need both of them. Adrenal glands produce corticosteroids. Corticosteroids are, for instance, like cortisone. And I'd mentioned the other one, aldosterone. There are plenty of others, but those are the two major ones. Cortisone is an anti-inflammatory, of course. Aldosterone helps with the reabsorption of water from the kidneys. Okay. The adrenal gland in its uh, cortex produces epinephrine. The corticosteroids are produced in the adrenal medulla. Think of the kidney. The adrenal cortex produces epinephrine. We usually call it adrenaline or norepinephrine or noradrenaline. There are different forms, but this is the sympathetic nervous system's material for fight or flight. The ovaries, they're not only reproductive organs, they are endocrine glands. And they produce estrogen. This works as feedback to the pituitary gland, countering FSH. If FSH from the pituitary gland tells the ovary to mature a follicle, and it does, well, we don't want another follicle matured, not usually anyway. And if we're successful with the maturation of a follicle, we produce estrogen, telling the pituitary gland to knock it off for a while, like up to 9 months. Progesterone is also produced by a portion of the ovary that we'll be talking about later in the last section. And progesterone does the same thing. It causes the uterus to prepare for pregnancy, but it also tells the pituitary gland not to produce any more FSH for a while. We don't need more FSH. We don't need more eggs to be matured if we have a pregnancy already established. And that is the message that progesterone sends. The testes are a reproductive organ, but they're also an endocrine gland producing testosterone, maintaining what we call secondary sex characteristics in males, their voice, their beard. And some people now are taking multi doses of it, I suppose. I guess the world's supposed to be looking more muscular. Looks the same to me. Okay. The pineal body or pineal gland. Okay, you saw this one in the brain. It produces melatonin, and melatonin helps with the regulation of the circadian cycle. That's the day-night alternation cycle that we have, and prepares us for sleep. We just went through daylight savings time change, and if you were like me, uh, you'd look out the window in the morning and not know if it's night or morning. You couldn't remember, and had to get used to it. Okay. Some people take melatonin when they come in from a plane flight from a long distance. They try to take it at a time that'll put them to sleep normally, rather than to sleep at the time zone that they have left. I've never found that stuff to work at all. I just uh, gradually wean it off. I stay up late. I stay up a little bit less late. Finally, I'm back into my routine. That's just simply a picture showing where everything is. I'm sure you're not unfamiliar with this at all. Okay, so to wrap it up, basically you need to know the names of the endocrine glands, their secretions, the abbreviation for each hormone that has an abbreviation. It's shown in the chart, the target organ, and the effect. In other words, this comes down to knowing the chart. This will be important for lecture test 3, which is what you'll begin studying for, I think, as soon as we finish practical exam 3. Okay. Now, we're going to do something. I want you to understand that practicum 3 is highly image based. Okay. Uh, so I hope you have your internet working okay. Uh, Maybe the neighbor does. Otherwise, just so you can get your pictures loaded. If you haven't had trouble in the past tests, then you shouldn't have trouble with this one either. Okay. I'm going to ask that, not that I need to, but I'm going to just to be safe. Nobody videotape the screen right now. I don't know if you do that anyway. Probably not. Okay. I'm going to show you quickly, and I mean quickly, what practicum 3 looks like. Okay. It's the actual practicum 3. I'm going to go by it so fast you can't read it. I hope you can't read it. Okay, here it comes. Okay, take a look. Get the idea? What you need to study.
So it's basically just all pictures
Bit-
most.
Well, let's see. Let's see. There's not a picture there. Not a picture there. Not a picture there or there. But mostly, isn't it? And it's pictures you have seen before. Uh, I know some of the brain pictures and heart pictures you haven't seen, but you've seen models just like it. I think these are nice pictures, actually.
Is this the practicum?
This is the practicum.
Yeah.
Now, you see those? You can. These are vessels that are big, clear. You can find all these in the PowerPoints that I mentioned to you on the website. Okay. And that's it. Okay.
So is it 80 questions or 100?
It's I didn't notice the number on the last one. Did it say 80?
Yeah, I had 80.
No, no. Hang on. It's 100 points, so there's 100 questions in there. Okay. Uh, there will be 100 questions. Maybe I did. My finger got tired. Okay. But if there are 80, well, I got to work and make 20 more. But there's 100 questions in there right now. Whether I showed them to you or not. I don't. My idea in showing to you this material is so that I can get you pumped up to ask questions and know what to study for, what type of test it's going to look like. That's all. Any questions about it?
I saw it looked like one of the models, it was like the spinal, like the gray matter and the white matter. I didn't know that was going to be on the test.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Here it is. Vertebra model. See it?
Oh, okay. I was just thinking fetal
It's no,
circulation.
no, it's no. Anything that's up here under now module 13, okay, for this week, uh, this is all uh, fair game. Even the practice tests, I could use some of those. I didn't use the practice test uh, uh, model diagram of the heart. I use photographs for everything on this one. Well, uh, hang in there. We'll come back to that. Yeah, I felt really antsy when I saw that practicum 3 was somehow wide open this morning, and I felt very relieved that nobody had found it or taken advantage of it, so that we're still set to go. Sometimes you get a decent good a group of students. Okay, I'd call you that. Okay, and sometimes you uh, get some students not quite so. What's the word? Decent. Okay, and it's none of you. Okay, none of you. I'm thinking back just for a second. We used to teach, or I used to teach too, biology field studies. And I'd take a group of 30 odd people out to the desert or to Kings Canyon uh, or Cuamaca before it burned down. And they'd be out there for 2 nights, uh, 3 days, and hike, identify plants, identify animals and biomes and everything. It was a real neat field course. I liked it. I treated it as a really legitimate course, but I know some of the students took it because for $35 they get fed for the whole time and they get free gasoline and everything. And that was expected. Okay. Did any of you ever take any of those field courses? Nope. Oh, you have to imagine, Dana.
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. You just well, they were a lot of fun, and there's a lot of learning you could do there. Some of the instructors, I think, didn't treat it as anything much more than uh, a fun class, but I had a lot of learning in mind and a lot of hiking, a lot of hiking. But I always knew those classes were an accident waiting to happen. I mean, you got people, 30 people out in the boonies someplace or up in the rocks someplace, and one of them or more is going to do something crazy. So you have to watch out for that, you know. Uh, well, you don't have to watch out that they see your examination or anything like that because it's not a written type class. We were out at Joshua Tree National Monument once, and it was cold. It was in November, and it was 18 degrees at night. I told them in a thing, a pre-class, what to expect. I told them, one, you can't drink. They go, what do you mean? I said, you can't drink on the field trip. And if you can't, stay off of it for 3 days, you better stay home and take care of it. Okay, don't bring it. Don't bring your problem out there for 3 days. We don't want you. You know. And then we gave up the other rules and such so that we could have a good time when we actually got there. But I knew something would happen. I'm always suspecting something will go wrong. If anything can go wrong, it will go wrong. 18 degrees, and guys come over to me at 3:30 in the morning, wake me up. I was underneath a rock on in my sleeping bag, and they wanted to fight. They want to beat me up. I said, "What's the matter?" And they said, "We're cold. We're cold." I said, "Well, you didn't even bring a jacket. That's 18 degrees. How dumb can you get?" And that didn't make him any calmer. So I took him over to where we'd had a bonfire that night. I had them take shovels out of the trucks and dig trenches, put coals in the trenches, put sand on top of that, and then put their sleeping bag, which they did have, on there and lie down. In other words, they were heated from the ground by the coals. They were very happy at that point. That was great. Okay. Well, the second night it was going to be just as cold, and we talked about it amongst the people who didn't prepare properly. And we sat around a big bonfire again, built this beautiful bonfire. And nothing had gone wrong so far, and I'm just waiting for it. And finally, where somebody suggests around the bonfire that each person has to do something, tell a joke, sing a song, uh, do something. Okay, everybody started to do something. And then it came all the way around, 30 odd people. It came to my turn. It's dark as hell out there, except for the bonfire. And damn, I got my banjo out and started playing. uh, I got my banjo out and started playing. And about 7 or 8 people from around the big circle we had got up almost on cue. There was a signal given, and they met me in the darkness in the back, and then they took off out into the desert. They had a lantern, but I knew something was going wrong. There it is. They're going to go off and smoke, or they're going to go off and drink, or they're going to go off and do something, but I'm responsible. So the next person in the circle was Paul Schneider, my driver, the guy I hired to drive us out there in one of the trucks. And I gave him the banjo. He and I were friends, and when I took up the banjo, he liked it so much, he took it up too. I think he was better than me. But I gave him the banjo and I said, Paul, I want you to play a banjo song. I want you to make it sound like there's banjo here. I'm still here. I'm going after those people. I'm going to go find out what they're up to. And so I go on out there. I got a flashlight, but I can't use it. If I do, they'll see me. And I don't want them to catch me. I want to catch them. So I'm going out to the desert in the dark, barely following their light. I'm running into cacti, terrible, terrible cactus, and stumbling around, but they still don't know I'm behind them. And they go up into the rocks, jumbo rocks, huge, huge boulders. They climb up in there, and I can see the lights up there, and they're up on some ledge. Well, I got to go up, but I can't turn on my flashlight. And I'm going up and I'm sliding down granite, up and down, trying to find a foothold. I finally got near them. I was underneath them and I could see lights. I could see, look like candlelight. That's unusual for Joshua Tree because it's always so windy, but not that night. And I was so cold at 18 degrees. I shined my light on these guys, all of them, guys and girls, or if I could say that. And I shined my light and said, "You guys are busted," you know. And I said it just as I said it. I slid down halfway, uh, and pulled myself back up. And I get up to the top, get up to the top, and I'm looking around, and there are candles. I was right about that, but it wasn't just candles. Every candle had a Bible open in front of it. They were there for a Bible study. God damn it. I'm looking back from my perch up there at my campsite way in this distance, and I just slink back. I just slink back. By the time I got back to our campsite, everybody was drunk on peppermint schnapps. My driver had brought it all. Uh, so you never know. Anyhow, thanks for not taking advantage of that practicum 3. Really. Okay, I'm going to give us a break for 10 minutes. Now, what are we going to do when I come back? Uh, when I come back, I'm going to start again, reviewing again. If you want to nominate a topic to start with, fine, I'll listen. Otherwise, I'll just start at the top and work down. Okay, nothing wrong with review. But if you've had it up to here with review and you don't think you need it, well then come back on Thursday. Thursday we will have a lecture, lymphatic system, and then we'll have more opportunity for review. Okay, we've left plenty of time to do the P4 material, and we're actually sitting pretty. Okay, so I'm going to pause the recording, and then I'm going to black everything out for 10 minutes. See you then.